What destroys couples is not the lack of love. That's what I'll show you next. Some separations do not start with betrayal, a fight, or a clear mistake. They begin in silence, in the accumulation of hurts that have never been said, in the emotional distance that grows without explanation. And when the couple realizes they're already living as strangers under the same roof. In several reports, both in psychological counseling and spiritual accompaniment, there's a pattern that repeats. Couples who seem solid collapse suddenly, as if something had been implanted between them. It is not just wear, it is emotional sabotage, a kind of invisible force that feeds pride, isolates feelings, and gradually destroys affection. In this video, you'll understand how this demon, whether seen as a spiritual influence, unconscious pattern, or emotional saboteur, specifically acts to separate couples, and why so many relationships fall apart not for lack of love, but for a silent war that many do not even realize they are facing. 1. Pride as a tool of separation. Everything could be solved with a simple conversation, but no one takes the first step. One asks for more attention, the other feels burdened. One waits for recognition, the other thinks he is already doing too much. The cycle repeats itself, and silence becomes fertile ground for wrong interpretations. Pride, in this context, works as the main tool of what many call invisible oppression in relationships. Not healthy pride, which protects self-esteem, but one who refuses to give in even when he knows he is wrong. This type of pride acts as a filter. It distorts the other's words, blocks empathy, and feeds the idea that I'm right and the other doesn't understand me. Experts in marriage counseling point out that when pride takes hold, communication does not disappear. It changes form, appears in indirect, in departures, in cold looks. Love still exists, but it is hidden behind walls that the two build little by little, often without realizing. This is one of the first signs that something bigger is acting in the relationship, when keeping reason becomes more important than keeping the bond. 2. Routine as emotional anesthesia. Love does not disappear overnight. It falls asleep. And often, who puts him to sleep is the routine itself. Wake up, work, take care of the house, solve problems. The couple begins to live in the automatic, fulfilling tasks side by side, but emotionally distant. The touch disappears. The look loses intention. Conversations become checklists. The problem is not in the routine itself, but how it can be used as a distraction. It is in this scenario that many spiritual leaders and therapists identify the presence of the devil between couples, an influence that transforms coexistence into isolation, that makes the couple stop choosing each other every day. Emotional wear and tear start small, an untold frustration, an ignored need, but it builds up, and by the time they both realize, they're already living more as partners than as partners. The emotional connection, which was once alive, is being sabotaged by a false sense of normality. It is at this stage that many couples give up without understanding what really drove them away, because there was no explicit crisis, only a gradual disconnection, where love was lost in the midst of haste, tiredness, and absence of real presence. 3. When mistrust enters, the bond begins to leave. There is not always betrayal. Sometimes there is no lie, but mistrust comes in any way, sneaky, subtle, almost imperceptible. It starts with an innocent question, why hasn't he answered me yet? Or why is she so different? And grows as a seed planted in insecurity. According to many reports in couples therapy sessions, this mistrust is not fueled by evidence but by distorted interpretations. Small actions are seen as signs of disinterest or contempt, and the more the couple tries to decipher each other's behavior, the less they really listen. In spiritual visions, this stage is described as a direct action of forces that want to break the bond of trust, the center of emotional intimacy. It is a phase in which the couple begins to act with fear, defense, and vigilance rather than surrender. The house becomes an environment of tension disguised as normality. Distrust of the other, when there is no real basis, may seem only a symptom of insecurity, but when it becomes constant, it reveals something greater, a silent division that corrodes from within. Because where there is no trust, love begins to hide. 4. The poison of silent comparison. In the midst of a marital crisis, one detail often goes unnoticed: the way we see the relationship of others. Couples who only show themselves happy on social networks, friends who seem to have a perfect connection, idealized stories of romance. All this starts to create a distorted reference of what should be happening inside the house. The comparison is a subtle trap. It plants a dangerous idea. If my relationship is not like theirs, then something is wrong. This generates frustration, and the frustration when it is not understood, becomes collection, indifference, or flight. Spiritually speaking, this phase represents one of the most effective strategies of what many call spirit of division, to provoke in the couple the feeling that what they have is not enough. The happiness of the other becomes a mirror that distorts the value of what you built together. Many relationships end not because they are broken, but because they have been compared to an illusion. The neighbor's grass looks greener until you find out it's artificial. The silent comparison undermines contentment, weakens admiration, and puts the couple in a standard demand that no one can sustain. 5. When the partner ceases to be shelter, there is a moment, almost always unnoticed, in which the couple stops looking for difficulties. A problem appears at work, a personal frustration, a silent anxiety, and instead of sharing with the other, the person saves, pretends that everything is fine, and begins to face alone. It is at this point that many couples get lost, when they cease to be shelter for each other. It is not lack of love, it is lack of emotional space, lack of real listening, lack of presence without judgment. Reports of couples in crisis show that when this happens, the relationship becomes coexistence, each with their fears, their pressures, and their private loneliness. Even being together every day, it is a stage of internal detachment when touch continues, but affection no longer reaches the heart. From a spiritual point of view, this isolation is described as one of the darkest phases of the evil influence on relationships. When the emotional link breaks and the two begin to live as two parallel worlds within the same home, it is here that the demon among couples becomes stronger, when the other ceases to be a safe place and becomes just someone who is there. 6. The silence that seems peace, but is giving up. Not every separation begins with discussion. Many begin with a silence that seems peace, but is pure tiredness. The couple stops arguing, but also stops trying. There is no more attempt to solve, understand, or reconnect. Only a cold, mechanical, and unaffectionate coexistence. This silence is one of the most dangerous signs in a relationship because it does not indicate solution, indicates withdrawal. The absence of conflict may seem like tranquility, but often hides a hard truth. The two have already disconnected emotionally, and they no longer expect anything from each other. Both therapists and spiritual leaders agree on this point. When a couple enters this stage, it is because all the previous small cracks, pride, routine, mistrust, comparison, isolation, have been piling up to create an insurmountable wall. Some describe this process as a kind of slow death of the relationship. Others as a silent victory of what he set out to separate. The demon between couples, at this stage, no longer needs to act actively. The damage is done. And the most cruel, there is still love, but he is buried under layers of unresolved grievances and unspoken words. Rarely a relationship ends by lack of love. Most of the time, it dissolves gradually under the weight of silent factors that accumulate. Pride disguised as reason, routine that anesthesia, mistrust without basis, unrealistic comparisons, emotional isolation, and finally, a silence that seems peace but is abandonment. These elements do not arise out of nothing. In many spiritual and even psychological visions, they are seen as external, invisible influences that act specifically to break effective connections. A kind of sabotage that does not scream, but corrodes. A demon that feeds on what is not said, is not cured, is not confronted. Understanding these signals is a first step to breaking this cycle, because not all removals are definitive. Sometimes, it is just a result of something that has never been named. If this content made sense to you, leave a comment telling how you see these signs in relationships around you, or even on your own. This kind of exchange can help more people than you think.